how to develop an awesome personality. Now, some of you guys might be like, why do I even need to develop one? Well, being an awesome person and having an exuberant personality, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be high energy all the time or high energy at all, but having a very interesting personality will make people attracted to you. You'll make more friends, girls will be more interested in you. Some people may even say that it will outshine your looks, and there's just a lot of other benefits. You're more amused all the time, you're entertained with boring stuff in life, and people just see you as valuable just by being around you. And here's one of the biggest distinctions that I used to have as well. This was a misconception that a lot of people do have, and I feel like if you want to attain this, it's one very important thing that you should know. You don't have to know it, but it's very important. Now, first off, let's look at someone who we can look at as a very amazing personality. I like to think of Russell Brand or Will Smith. Now, to a blind person who has no idea what this guy looks like, just based on hearing his voice and what he has to say, most people would be entertained, and it would just be a very interesting conversation with him, and just to be around him and listen to him talk. Now, here's the thing. Personalities like this are usually attained through experiences in life and development. Both of these guys, like it or not, weren't born out of the womb as interesting as they are now. And there's also a wide range of different types of personality traits that can make you interesting or cool or not boring. And these range from being funny to just making everything funny or interesting or entertaining, or just being very confident, or twisting everything to make people very amused. And it's not about being some sort of entertainer or clown. And both of these guys are entertainers, in fact, but a lot of their stuff is just them talking. And they do, Will Smith particularly, he gets into a lot of very deep motivational stuff as well. And so here's the big distinction that a lot of people should know about. I used to think that having a awesome personality was something you were born with. And Will Smith and Russell Brand, although they may have been born with a higher proclivity to sort of engage people in conversation and talk, they were born more confident out of the womb, no doubt. And that probably spurred them to sort of develop their traits even more and more and more until they got to where they are. But to say that someone either has this or doesn't have this is completely wrong. It's something that can definitely be developed through practice, through skill, and just trying it out. And the biggest thing is accepting failure. Sort of like when you tell a joke and no one laughs. You sort of have to assess what went wrong, readjust, and then figure out how to make this joke actually funny, and then try again. And then that's the one thing that a lot of people don't do. And it's not always being funny or telling jokes. It can be just making boring stuff interesting. And that leads to the second big thing you should look to, and a lot of people get wrong when they think of someone who has a really cool personality. And some of you guys might be watching who are in the opposite side of the spectrum. I know people like this. I've met them. They sort of relied on their looks too much, and they just end up being very boring. They used looks as a crutch, and all of a sudden they've sort of realized, oh shoot, it's not working anymore. And there's a lot of reasons for this. A lot of people, especially like some male models, who graduate college and stuff, they just end up not having too much success with women or stuff because they've relied too much on their looks and their personality is very boring and bland. The good news is you can work on this and everyone can get better if you practice. So here's the second biggest thing. So this is another huge misconception. I used to think that an interesting person with like a really interesting personality, he would just always just be in interesting places, which made him interesting. But the truth of the matter is that it doesn't matter where he is, who he's talking to, or what he's doing, or what he's talking about. If you look at Russell Brand, a lot of the times in interviews, they will ask boring questions, or they'll ask really boring stuff and talk about boring stuff. And sometimes it's just the whole environment he's in is boring. And that's what I envision as someone who is ideally an interesting personality. Someone who can spin anything boring, any environment or situation or topic, from boring to interesting. And that's what makes them stand out. And I like to envision something where, like, you take this interesting person, Russell Brand, and place him into like the most boring place you can, like a bare room with 4 white walls and a white ceiling and a white floor. Guarantee you, if he stepped into the room, he would make that interesting. He'd make jokes about the wall. He'd start making sexual references somehow, just based off that. And it would be entertaining. Now, granted, no one can do this forever. Russell Brand might go against that. He'd say he could, but no one can be that interesting forever. And it's okay to sometimes just sit there and have nothing to say. That's another big thing. Some people just get very antsy and nervous when they run out of stuff to say. And you don't have to constantly do that. That's more rooted into insecurity on your part and just not being confident and relaxed enough to let a few moments go by. And that's the biggest thing for me, because I used to think, oh, I wish I was in a more interesting place. Oh, this is a boring place. I wish I was at a party where all the cool people were. And these were like the stupid thoughts I used to have, and that's not how it works. Okay? Guarantee you, the most interesting people, it's not because they're at these interesting places that make them interesting. Granted, because they're so cool, they're probably invited to a lot of these things, and that's why they end up being at a lot of these things just to make it more fun. But guarantee you, Russell Brand or Will Smith or Jack Nicholson, I don't know, any of these people, you can place them with boring people. That's another big thing. Boring people is something that a lot of people get wrong, especially dudes. A lot of guys, if they're talking to a girl they don't find attractive, whether it's at some sort of social gathering or something else, they don't feel like talking to them, and they're just bored and they're sitting there. And then on the very rare case they do end up talking to a girl they do find attractive, sometimes they just end up boring her out of her mind, and then they're left alone again. Sorry guys, there's like a freaking helicopter over there. Why does it have to go so slow? But anyways, it's not about the situation. It's about you. It's not about the people either. Guarantee you, and you'll see this a lot. Look at the most interesting person that you've ever seen at school, or the most, awesome personality that you've ever met at work, or if you've graduated college or high school, at your job. And guarantee you, he's engaging and talking and just being an interesting person to whoever. He's not like trying to turn on the charm only when there's attractive girls around or when there's people he deems interesting. And that's what makes him truly a cool person. Because if you do it the other way and you only turn it on sometimes, quite honestly, when you're off, that's your true self, and that's what most people will label you as. And that's all I gotta say for this video. As always, I'm not some sort of master at this. I'm still kind of learning about this, and if you've seen my other videos and my interactions with girls, I'm not the most interesting person, which leads to another point. It's sometimes a two-way mirror. Now, I'm not the type to go around blaming other things and making excuses, but quite frankly, sometimes you gotta let go and realize, okay, you gotta stop plowing, dude. This person is just not interested in talking, or he or she is just really boring, or he or she is just not even trying, and maybe sometimes they are trying, but you just don't have common interest in common. And yeah, that's all I have to say about this video. Leave a like, favorite, comment, and subscribe. And I guess the last golden tip, if you must have one, is don't do drugs. No, I'm kidding. The last thing would probably be, yeah, seriously, don't do drugs. No. If you are talking to someone and you don't have any common interests in common, like you ask them, like, do you like lacrosse? And they say no. And then you say, oh, I play video games like League of Legends. Do you? And they say no. And then they list the things they do, and it's completely off. Then it is, let's be honest, it's hard to actually connect. So again, that's a good example of not to keep plowing. But to say that just because you don't have common interests with someone at all means you can't be good friends with them is atrocious, to say the least. Because I feel like for sure you can definitely be friends with someone even if you have no interest and you have clashing personalities. Say like one person's really shy and emo, and then the other one's very confident and just a social butterfly and preppy, you could say. And I mean, I've seen this. People do get along. It's just very strange. You have nothing in common, and it just somehow clicks, and their personalities mesh despite them being so contrasting, and it works out. And that's one of the biggest things I want to bring home to wrap up this whole thing. And that's just the fact that, I mean, those are rare occurrences, so you sometimes do have to let it go if something doesn't work out. And that's a big reason why a lot of people just are very confused about this, because they just keep plowing with one person and then they give up and they're like, oh, throw my hands up, I'm screwed. But personality is something you have to sort of develop over time, and don't try too hard. I mean, if the other person's not trying, remember, it's a two-way mirror, and some people just don't give a crap, and there's nothing you can do about it. And then there's this one last thing that's really important that I wanted to tell you, but I can't remember. Let me just think for a second. It was very, very important, and I have to like tell you this. This is probably like the biggest thing. I can't believe I forgot it. Let me just think. While I'm thinking, I do want to remind you not to do drugs. Seriously, though. Seriously. Let me think about it. This might take a while, so if you guys want to leave, just let me know, and just you guys can go. But I'm not going to edit this video. I'm just going to leave it here and then think about it until I figure it out, and then I'm just going to tell you guys. So it was something about what I just said about not. Oh yes, one big thing is that you don't always have to talk about things. That's a big one. a lot of people, when they're trying to talk to someone new, the first thing they turn to is, what do you have in common? What are your hobbies? And they talk about either objects or events that they have in common. And then if this completely fails, they just give up. And that I've been a big person who's sort of done this in the past. But what I've learned recently is that, like, I remember times when there's people who really connected, and they didn't really talk about stuff they had in common. It was just simply talking about what was present at the moment. Like, they would make jokes about just the desk they were sitting at, the class they were attending, how difficult the assignment was, and just all these boring things that were in the present that had nothing to do with common interests or whatever. They were just simply in the same class together. I remember it. I forgot their names, but these were two guys in my senior English class. I took advanced placement English in high school, and I was a senior. And I remember it because both of these guys were like they had clashing personalities. Both of them were very confident, but in very different ways. One was very like valiant and sort of noble, and then the other one was sort of like, yeah, he was sort of like sketchy, and yeah, he would make like jokes that were kind of sketchy too. And these people, they never really talked about common interests or anything like that. They just made jokes about the present, what was happening to them at that very moment, and they talked about that stuff. And it was the most boring stuff looking back, but they made it so interesting. I couldn't even replicate it, but it was just like the most mundane thing, like the essay that we had to get done. They would just spin off these crazy jokes, and it wasn't always funny. You don't always have to be some clown to have a good personality, but it was something that was very interesting. Whether it was like a Shakespeare, he made like sexual jokes about Shakespeare and so forth. So it just takes a little bit of practice, a lot of practice actually, and you have all the materials you need. That's a big one. A lot of people think, oh, I can't really practice unless there's something interesting going on, like I'm at like a house party or something. No, that's not always true. Just like based on the stuff in the background in this room, you can spin off a lot of interesting stuff off of that, sexual jokes and so forth. So work on it. Leave a comment and do just that. Spin some jokes or does make something interesting to do with the background or a pencil or something. I don't know. Peace. Thanks for watching this whole thing. Like, favorite, comment, and subscribe.